Alright, so it's time to start building up a final scene. Before we can populate our crowds, we need to create a layout of the space where your crowds will be living in. We'll be placing different buildings as well as setting up a ground for our crowds. Here, it would be good to have some references of the final camera angles and final look and feel of your scene. So for my final scene, I will be using all custom agents imported from DAZ. But for the purpose of this course, I'll be showing you the same concepts using Mixamo agents. Before we can start bringing in our agents, we need to get started on our scene layout. For my final scene, I'm using the steampunk kit from KitBash 3D. KitBash 3D also offers a lot of free 3D models that you can use to set up your environment. You can also use other sources of 3D models to provide a nice background for your crowds to live in. So for my reference for the environment as well as our crowds, I am taking a few references from the show Arcane and trying to create a similar silhouette of the layout as well as some of the camera angles. So let's get started. First, I'll take a new geo node and I'll call this ground. I'll dive inside it and take a grid node. Take a null and call it out underscore ground. We'll be coming back to this network once we have our building set up. So let's take another geo node. I'll call this buildings. Let's quickly go ahead and save our file. I'll save this inside my project and call it final scene layout. So inside the buildings tab, I'll take an FBX skin import node, which is used to import any of the FAX geometries that you have, and import my steampunk kit that I have downloaded from KitBash 3D. You can alternatively also use the Cargo KitBash 3D plugin to import the 3D models individually. So I'll select one building, attach a blast node to it, and I'll start with the bigger buildings in my scene first. Click on delete non-selected, add a match size at the bottom of it to get the building on origin. And in the justify Y, I'll set this to minimum so that it sits perfectly on the grid. Then I can take a transform node and we'll use this to roughly place our buildings for now until we have other elements set up in our scene. Let's go back to the ground geo. Right now, my ground is very small compared to my buildings. So let's increase its size. Let's try and find a slightly smaller building. Yeah, so that looks better. Now based on this, I can start getting my camera set up. So we'll be using this as a background element in our scene. So I'll transform my camera until I am happy with the angle. And once you have something that you're happy with, we can place the other smaller buildings in the scene as well. So now I'll be taking something that fills in the right side of my screen. Let's select another building. I'll select this tall building here. Again, take the math size as well as copy over your transform. Let's get it closer to the camera. We can change the height a bit, and we'll be hiding these penetrations through the ground using our crowds. Now once you have the foreground building set up, I'll do the same things for the buildings in the background and continue setting up our environment. So once I've gotten the buildings layout set up, I'll also set up some of my cameras. And we'll continue the lesson from there. So I now have a basic layout set up, and I have set up 3 cameras that I'll be using to render out the geometry. Each camera is animated for a frame range of 120 frames. And based on these 3 cameras, we'll be populating our crowds. Now while we have our materials coming in, these are not properly set up for Solaris. To do that, let's get our geometries unpacked. I'll take an unpack node. Then I'll take my matte extractor node and click on create materials. And our layout for our crowds is ready. Now in case you don't have access to any sources where you can gather environments from, for the purpose of this course, we don't need anything too specific. So based on the environment that you just saw, I have created a proxy file that you can use to populate the crowds. Alright, so using the switch, I'll take a null and call it out buildings. So let's take this in Solaris and see how we can get this rendered. So in Solaris, I'll take a scene import node and I'll select my buildings. Now we have our buildings coming in with proper materials attached to them. I'll take a dome light to better visualize it. And in the texture, I'll plug in an HDRI that I have downloaded from HDRI Haven. So we have an environment coming in with all the materials attached to it correctly. Now let's take a scene import cameras node to import our cameras as well. To actually get our skies to show up in our renders, in dome light, I'll go to the karma settings and next to the render light geometry, I'll click on set or create and enable render light geometry. This way, we'll have a sky dome visible in our renders. Next, in the same scene import, I'll also add my ground. Since our ground doesn't have any materials, it's coming in as white. So let's head back to SOP context. And in the ground, I'll take a UV texture node, slightly increase the scale, keep the scale same on all 3 axes, take a material node, Now, we already have a ground material coming in for our buildings. So we can use the same material for our ground. Let's head back to stage. And now we have our ground material coming in as well. Let's check all three of our camera angles. We have some repetitions in our ground textures showing up in our wide shot. But since we'll have our crowds on top of it, that won't be a problem. Now let's try and get our proxy geometry rendered. So I'll switch my input to 1. So while we have our geometry coming in, we still need to apply some materials to it. Let's take a material node and connect it to our proxy geo and take our material network. I'll call this proxy geo mat. We can dive inside it and take a karma material. Let's call this proxy geo as well. Connect it under my proxy geometry and we can head inside it. In the color, I'll be setting it to something like a yellow or a brownish yellow. I'll increase the metalness as well as the roughness. So if you want, we can also take a random color and drive our color attribute based on that color. So in this node, I can take an MTLX geometry color node and connect it to my base color. I'll take a ramp parameter and in this, I'll plug in a color ramp. I'll sample screen colors to get a color palette in based on an image. So if we want less or more of some colors, we can get that easily done after importing the sampled screen colors. I'll just keep these three colors for now. Just to get something that looks clean. I can plug in the same material in the ground as well. So you can create something as simple as some boxes or as complicated as you want for your crowds to live in. So now we can take a USD ROP node to cache out our buildings. I will save this in the same path that I used previously and I'll rename this node to buildings. Duplicate this node and use the same for cameras. For cameras, let's set the frame range to render specific frame range. And I'll click on Save to Disk. So our layers are now saved. We can use the sublayer node and bring in our buildings layer and check the materials. I'll connect the lights to my sublayer and I will also load my cameras in. So now we have our scene layout set up. In the next lesson, we'll be setting up our crowds using all the core concepts that we have covered in this course. We'll be creating a narrative around our scenes, and in the forthcoming lessons, we'll be looking at how we can get all of this rendered together. Thanks for watching and see you in the next lesson.